35 of TDR, the end of my 5th week now. Can't believe how quickly this time has gone. Today, I want to talk about a conversation I had with my last client of the day. You know who you are, or maybe you don't. You will when we hear this conversation. We talked about vulnerability and how important it is to tap in to our self-compassion about the times we choose to eat more, be that on a day-by-day basis. Maybe you've been, 80% on plan, and then there's been a couple of times when you haven't stuck to it completely, or like me, where I was in a place where I was in complete overwhelm from everything that was tough that was going on in my life, and I managed that with an old strategy of using food, albeit healthy food. And I ran a story which was, but this is all healthy food, and so I can eat this, because the eating helped me to lean away from how awful my life was at that time, and it helped me on some level to cope. Now, the part of me that was coping, or thought I was coping, or thought it was helping me to cope, was a unconscious part of me that has used that strategy before. Any of us who have weight problems, we have used that strategy before. And for 7 years, I hadn't really used that strategy. Maybe every now and again, I would, with self-compassion and empathy, understand. I often talk about a time when we took Ollie off to university for the first time, and I cried and cried and cried on the way home. And I had every intention of eating whatever I could lay my hands on. The difference then was that I used it in the short term, but by the next day, the feelings had passed, or at least dulled a little bit, and I just got on with stuff, and the overeating stopped as a way of managing that emotion. But when I was unwell earlier this year and end of last year, it was a day-by-day strategy of coping with utter overwhelm with all of the difficult things that were going on for me. And I slipped back into that strategy and way of coping, albeit with healthy food, albeit with running the story that it was healthy stuff, and that, well, my neurologist said that I would put on weight because of the drugs affecting my metabolism, blah, 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 blah. But this vulnerability, going back to that, if you can be vulnerable and really, really, really look at that story that you're running and really be honest, that if you're vulnerable, then you're going to be honest about what's going on for yourself. And that way lies the possibility of a conversation between that conscious part of me that was, of course, absolutely horrified that my weight was going up, utterly mortified when I'm seeing new clients or returning clients, hating every moment that I was putting far too much healthy food into my mouth. That conscious part of me was utterly mortified, but the unconscious part of me was running, but this helps, but this helps, but this helps, but this helps. And so that was a strategy that I seized onto, that I've used many, many times in the past. And what I needed to do was be vulnerable, be really honest with myself, so that I could question myself about where did that behavior come from, who from, when did it first start? And I might not even be able to answer that, but when you really, really stop and think about it, usually you can backtrack it. And although the situation that I was in this time around was very, very different, it's still the same sort of strategy. And with strategies that we run, they're always coming from a place of positive intention. They're always designed to help us. although there may be elements of them that don't help us, and there clearly are if they create the problem of weight gain, but we have thought in our past that they kind of help us. And so what we need to do is to really be vulnerable, really accept yourself and be honest with yourself and learn to be at peace with what you've done. And I think that's what I've, 5 weeks into maintaining, that's where I'm at now. I'm at a point where I've really looked at and been honest with myself about what I was doing whilst I was really unwell. And I've just shown that self-compassion, and there's no judgment anymore about what I was doing. And I'm really compassionate with myself and really have started to understand what I was doing. And when you do that, you can start asking yourself okay, when you understand that it comes from a place of trying to just help yourself, you can then understand that it was just a way of attempting to deal with what life was throwing at you, which certainly was what it was for me through a very, very difficult time. And so that then allows you to then ask yourself okay, if this was just a strategy to try and deal with stuff that was happening with me, but it's not really helping because look at the weight gain now, well, then I've got to find other ways to solve that problem, haven't I? Or maybe this is just an old habit, because sometimes it isn't the same sort of situation, and sometimes you're just doing it because it's become a habit. Certainly wasn't for me, because I'd had pretty much 7 years of maintaining, and it was a very difficult situation when I slipped into an old strategy. But sometimes it doesn't always have to be about that. Sometimes there isn't a particular trigger that you can think of like there is for me. Sometimes it's just that you're repeating an old habit, and that's just past its sell-by date now. You don't need to carry on using that habit anymore. But for me, it was about saying to myself, okay, I've got to find other ways to solve the problem of what I was using this strategy for to maintain. And that way gives you true control